Welcome to the HBR IdeaCast. I'm Adi Ignatius, Editor-in-Chief of Harvard Business Review, and today with me is Professor Michael Porter of Harvard Business School, who's going to be talking with us today about an important new article in HBR about the next evolution of capitalism. Professor Porter, thanks very much for being with us.
Adi, my pleasure.
Now your article is meant to fix a problem. What is the problem?
Well, the problem is I think we've gotten into a very sort of vicious cycle in thinking about the relationship between business and society, and really the purpose of capitalism and the benefits of the capitalist system to society and to meeting society's needs, like improving people's lives and improving the health of communities. And we've gotten into a cycle where I think business has evolved, and thinking about business management has evolved in a direction that we've kind of narrowed the scope of how you create economic value. And increasingly, companies are being perceived as creating profit at the expense of the community, not creating profit that actually ultimately benefits the communities. As a result of this, I think government has increasingly seen business as a problem, as a source of bad things in society, and the mindset has become increasingly to regulate, to control, to tax, and ultimately now often political leaders are unable to pursue really business-friendly public policies because the political environment really almost forces them to be tough on business, despite the fact that we know at some deep level business and society need each other. But we've kind of gotten ourselves into a bad place.
But I think a lot of business people would argue what we do is run businesses, and we make profits, and when we're successful we hire people, and that's all we can do. I mean, to have an agenda beyond that is really outside of our scope.
Well, that has been the increasingly well-articulated view about the relationship between business and society over the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, Milton Friedman, famously argued that the social responsibility of business was to maximize its profits. And this simple act of profit maximization was good in and of itself. That was enough. That was sufficient. So what was good for business was sort of axiomatically good for society. But I think as we've seen the effect of business practices on things like health and nutrition and kind of the mortgage crisis, and there's example after example of where actually it's much more complicated than that. And yes, profit is not inconsistent with society's needs, but if you think about creating economic value in a narrow way, if you don't understand really the broader and more subtle and longer term influences on the ultimate sustainability of a firm's success, you can get into a situation where that profit really does come at the expense of society. And I think there's a backlash of society saying, wait a minute, we don't like this profit. I mean, all these companies right now, as you know, Adi, are reporting increasing profits, but there's no jobs. And the communities are saying, gee, it's great that XYZ Corporation is making more money, but what's in that for us? But we can see the layoffs, and we can see our local suppliers who have been cut off and have to go out of business, and we can see all this development and pollution and strain on resources, and we understand that profits are good and somehow that we need capitalism, but there's this increasing I think tension between ultimately partners who actually are mutually dependent on each other.
Now, the term you use is creating shared value. So talk a little bit about how that would work if it worked.
Yes. Well, the basic premise of this article is that we once thought if business just increases its profit, what's good for business is then good for society. I think what this article tries to say is really we need to kind of think differently. What's good for society is actually good for business. And that sounds like a play on words, but it's really quite a profound difference in perspective. The concept of shared value says that actually creating societal benefit is really a powerful way to create economic value for the firm, and that we've missed by and large many of these opportunities to create profit, let's call it the right way. profit that actually comes from meeting fundamental human societal needs. So, I mean, the most obvious example of that would be the environment. That, we used to think that, being environmentally friendly was a good thing to do. That if you were a good person in a good company and you were being responsible, that you'd worry about the environment. Well, we have companies now that are understanding that if they think about the environment, they actually save gobs of money by reducing energy cost and minimizing unnecessary logistics that they kind of somehow convinced themselves was a good idea in some theoretical view of how to globalize. We're seeing all kinds of examples that by actually creating products that are actually dealing not just with sort of contrived needs or trying to force products onto the customer, but if we actually create products that are actually good for the customer, nutritionally good, environmentally good, help them save, help them, raise their family in a better way, that actually that's the right way to make economic profit. And so the concept of shared value tries to focus on the tremendous opportunity to create economic value through creating social benefit. And one of the underlying premises is that we've kind of maxed out on meeting the conventional needs that we've kind of taught ourselves to meet over the last decades, but we have vast needs in the world, not just in the developing world, but even in the advanced world. We have all kinds of people that are having issues of health and housing, and and let's get busy mobilizing capitalism to meet those needs. And by the way, we can make a lot of money doing that. But that kind of profit creates shared value. It's not just profit at the expense of society or at the expense of a consumer. It's really profit by benefiting or benefiting the society and the consumer.
I mean, it's a pretty dramatic rethink about capitalism. Are you, I guess, given your past and your history, are you surprised that Michael Porter has ended up here?
All my past work actually has sort of equipped me to now examine this issue. And of course, as you know, I'm both an economist, so I've been steeped in externalities and all that kind of stuff and social welfare theory and all that. But I'm also a business school professor, so I know a lot about firms and how they actually operate. I did a whole body of work on the role of location, where the company is matters. And I think that work was a critical piece of seeing the, if you will, these synergies between business and society. I think it's in a sense, the next chapter of thinking about strategy and about configuring value chains and about creating competitive advantage. I mean, we make the case in the article, Mark Kramer and I, that these sort of shared value dimensions of a company's strategy that involve these societal impacts on important societal needs, these are going to be some of the greatest differentiators that companies are going to be able to mobilize in the coming years. I mean, we've kind of tapped out the more conventional model of how to compete, and everybody imitates, but when you look at a company like Whole Foods that's created an enormous economic success by sort of building a shared value perspective into everything they do, and I think that the great strategy of the future are going to have this dimension, and the companies that are going to have the more sustainable advantages are not just going to be making these minor cost and quality differences. They're going to be engaging communities they've never served before. They're going to be thinking much more deeply about the underlying human needs that are related to their product.
But you can't always have it both ways, can you? I mean, at a certain point, companies are going to have to choose between community and profit, aren't they?
We would argue that there's many things that companies can do that don't involve the trade-off. And that's where the company should focus. I mean, I would say that every company is going to have to be compliant. It's going to have to obey the law. It's going to have to meet all legal, explicit, and community standards in terms of how it behaves. But shared value says that if we're going to go beyond that, don't just come up with a volunteer program to have people build houses. Don't just have your petroleum engineers out raking the beach on weekends to clean up the beach. Don't give money to 72 random social causes because you're trying to build your reputation. Figure out what your product is, what your value chain is, Understand where those things touch important social needs and problems. If you're a food company, boy, let's think about nutrition. If you're a company that makes an energy-using product, let's think about the energy use of the product. If you're a company that's in the financial services industry, let's think about kind of saving and sustainable financing or buying a home, but in a way that actually works for the consumer and is not sort of a cynical effort to force them to take out a mortgage that they're not going to really be able to pay back. So I think that there's going to be copious opportunities in the product, in the value chain, and in the cluster of supporting industries within the communities in which there's going to be copious opportunities to create shared value, I think, for many years to come.
Give me a concrete example.
Well, in the article, Adi, we use the concept of fair trade purchasing, which most of our viewers have heard of. The idea of fair trade is that the farmer or the small vendor is not getting enough of a price for their product or their crop, and the distribution channels and the marketing companies are getting too big a share. So the idea of fair trade is we've got to give better prices to the farmer so that they can have a living wage, and that's a classic kind of a CSR idea. It's really about, there's a fixed pie, there's a fixed amount of wealth, and we just have to share more of that wealth with the farmer. And if we do that, we're being good guys and we're being fair, okay? And now shared value thinking says, no, that's not the right way to think about it. The real opportunity is to expand the pie. The real opportunity is to figure out how we can create more value, and therefore the farmer will actually get rewarded for the reality of participating in creating more value, and everybody can benefit. And now the smart companies are understanding that if you train farmers better in how to grow crops, if you help them get access to appropriate fertilizer and seeds and seedlings to plant, if you assist them in improving the kind of logistical systems by which they're getting their products to market, you can make farmers dramatically more productive per hectare. You can raise the quality, therefore you can afford and in fact want to pay a higher price for a higher quality product, and all of a sudden you can go from improving a farmer's income by 20% to improving a farmer's income by 200 or 300%. But not through charity, not by being a good guy, but by actually expanding the pie, by creating economic value, but also creating social value at the same time. So that example, I think, is a pretty vivid framing of this difference of perspective, but also the tremendous size of the opportunity. One of the big objections to corporate social responsibility has been, why should your personal values about what you want to give to and what charities, why should you be spending the shareholders' money deciding that you want to support breast cancer versus, Habitat for Humanity? The shared value concept is very much about self-interest. It says it's in the self-interest of the company to think about purchasing coffee a different way. And in a sense, then, it's still the invisible hand of Adam Smith. It's not the corporation sort of wasting the shareholders' money. So I think the fair trade example, I think, really brings this point hopefully quite clearly to the fore, and will give hopefully companies opportunities to see how they can apply to their business.
I mean, it's an idea that has the potential to really change things. I'm very glad that you and your co-author have brought it to us. But how do we, what's next? How do we change the world?
Well, I think the first step is to provide a vocabulary and a framework for thinking about it, and of course, hopefully, we'll do that. I think there are some excellent companies that are leading the way here. I've presented this thinking a number of times to the sort of chief CSR officers of some of the biggest companies in the world, and that gather in various forums. And certainly the sophisticated business community is kind of understanding that the CSR is kind of a dead end. I mean, it was a phase, but I think we're ready to move on. I think that the folks in the CSR world now understand that the real impact that can be had is really not by the CSR department or by the charitable giving. The real impact is by actually mobilizing the business itself. So I mean, I think the time is right, and we have to now provide some of the toolkits that will allow companies to do this better. But I'm confident over the next few years that there'll hopefully be a literature that will develop on this. But I think the good news is that this is not something that is not yet being practiced in the real world. There are Nestle's, there are Unilevers, there are Cargills, there are GEs, there are enough examples. And also I think that there's going to be a fascinating period ahead of us. And again, I think we're not only going to do good for society, but we're going to end up reinventing a lot of how we configure value chains. We're going to rethink the whole notion of location, where we locate stuff. We're going to transform the way we deal with suppliers. We're going to learn how to redesign products in ways that are going to have, I think, benefits that will go way beyond what we can imagine today. So I'm really quite optimistic because I've seen how powerful this can be in enough cases that I think it's absolutely real.
Professor Porter, thank you for this. Fascinating ideas. It'll be very interesting to see how this all evolves.
My pleasure. It'll be a great journey.
The article is about creating shared value. For more on the topic, go to hbr.org.